here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the experimental music composer, performer and producer. It's the one and only Anthony Moore, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all the other groovy stuff. Was in various bands and an amazing musical career, including Slapp Happy, and also worked with Henry Cow. So you'll find out more about that and so much, much, much more later on in the interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Anthony, it's over to you.
Well, first of all, my father was a ridiculously restless, wandering sort of bloke who took the young family all over the place. And I think when I started really thinking about my very early exposure to music is radio, and it's the world service. So I never remember the name of it. That got drilled into my head pretty early, followed by somewhere living in what was then called Nyasaland. My dad was teaching students to become teachers training thing in the middle of nowhere, and I was dumped in a sort of horrible boarding school. And but yeah, so I was miles away from anywhere, and I don't know, but I think my first single was Blueberry Fats Domino.
Right.
Blueberry Hill. I don't know how long it had been out for. I don't suppose he'd just released it. This must be 1950, I don't know, late 50s or something.
Yes.
Then I bumped into... they finally got electricity in the house, which was exciting, especially as somebody bought me a Scalextric for Christmas and I couldn't plug it into anything for a while, and then finally it arrived, and that was then my parents' record collection was the next thing. So that is a lot of kitsch, basically. Simple tastes, my parents, I would say, to put it kindly.
Yes.
From sort of Jim Reeves to the Kingston Trio to Elgar to Three Coins in a Fountain, Edmundo Ross's Cha-Cha-Cha Orchestra. So that's my early fodder.
Yeah,
sonic fodder.
Yeah, but you were at that perfect age. I mean, I think you were born almost the same year as David Bowie and actually Lemmy from Motorhead. So you would have kind of experienced, and they often Bowie mentioned Fats Domino quite a lot. And also people like Little Richard and Elvis and Eddie Cochran. So were you quite drawn to the...
I was too kind of isolated to pick up on the American scene, really. And I mean, I was born in 48. Yes. So also I'm only in 58, I'm only 10. I don't know when Bowie was born.
No, I think he was 47 by memory, actually. But then I guess that would have been, you know, I was into glam rock at 10, so you get quite excited by the world of pop, don't you? There's kind of an excitement from the radio. I mean, you would have then been at that ideal age to have seen almost the birth of what we look at as pop rock with the Beatles and Stones and the Kinks and the Who. So did that come onto your radar quite quickly at the age?
Well, it came onto my radar as it came out, because the country where my dad was teaching, where they also asked him to stay on, broke away from the old empire, and he stayed on, and I got chucked into a sort of weird kind of, it wasn't a public school, but it was a sort of boarding grammar school, a strange creature. Way down in the southwest, in the county of my paternal grandparents. So once again, I mean, I was in the middle of nowhere in a sense. Certainly not living it up in London, but in Lyme Regis of all places.
Right.
It was the annual invasion of sort of mods and rockers into seaside towns got me there. That was good. I enjoyed that.
Yes.
And then music got played, and the radio, always the radio, and then those kind of bands come along, and you start to hear their music.
Yes. And at that stage, did you go from enjoying listening to music to trying to learn sort of an instrument at that point?
Sure. First guitar at sort of 12 or 13, the usual.
Yes.
And, but never immediately kind of saw it as a writing tool rather than wanting to become a virtuoso. So I basically, like many, just evolved into a kind of a strumming, untalented guitar strummer.
Yes.
I couldn't play licks or anything like that, really. Well, at least I couldn't improvise, and still can't really improvise, melodies and top lines. I can make a hell of a noise on it. I can play it with sort of all kinds of, nail files and toothbrushes and vibrators and whatever have you, but I can't actually play jazzy licks in time. At least not in time.
No. Did you leave school at 16 or 18 at that point during the 60s?
No, I was a bit thick. I think they kept me hanging around. Well, no, 18 it was. Yeah, no, 18. I did I did a couple of A levels, sort of art and English or something like uninspiring like that.
Yes.
And of course, then I took advantage of that brilliant invention, the arts college, the art school, which was such an inspired idea back in the late 40s to insert into all sorts of minor towns from sort of Barnsley to Winchester an art college where you could go without having to sit an exam, and where you would get, a grant to be able to rent a little pad or something, and where you got to meet other people and form bands and leave before the end with that famous qualification, 60s art school dropout.
Brilliant.
I'm proud to say I have one of those.
You framed it. You would have been then. Did you start to get that kind of excitement of the psychedelic period of the 60s as you sort of branched into the Summer of Love in 67 and that kind of psychedelic freak out? Were you sort of on that zeitgeist? Were you surfing those cosmic vibrations?
No, I don't think so. Actually, I was kind of I was very into sort of, I think, the idea of grandiose word, composing, whatever you want to, what did Cage call it? Organizing sound or something. But I was interested in form and pattern and repetition and so on. So I actually was into songs, in which sense the long duration psychedelic sort of freakouts didn't get to me that much. But what did, in long form style, was people like Lamont Young and Terry Riley and the minimalists, basically the American minimalists of the late 60s. And that caught me. But probably prior to that, my psychedelic experiences were pharmaceutical and musically Hendrix. Really, I suppose the arrival of Hendrix and the first 2 or 3 Hendrix albums, I suppose. Soft Machine actually got well into Soft Machine.
Yes.
There were the clubs, the UFO and Tottenham Court Road and Middle Earth and the Roundhouse and David Madala's Exploding Galaxy. But yeah, I think Soft Machine were really got to me, especially again, their 45-minute version of We Did It Again. And of course, later on, I got to work with Kevin and I got to know relatively well Robert as well. So, but Mike Ratledge's, I think it was a Lowry organ he played unusually. Lots of people think it was a Farfisa or something, but that really did blow my mind. I mean, that was brilliant. I thought all that sort of crushed, distorted harmonics and so on. Brilliant stuff. Okay, that's that bit.
But then during that, that world that you mentioned, is it UFO, and there was Joe Boyd, wasn't there, and that bunch called, there was Barry Miles and Hoppy Hopkins and was it International Times and Indica Books? So you had to embrace that kind of world quite a lot.
Yeah, no, on a personal level, I was aware of it. I think I probably did meet Joe back then, but I wasn't really a participant of it. And because the school I was sent to was so remote, really, from London, it's a bit later in the 60s that I turn up. I caught when I mentioned Middle Earth, Tottenham Court Road, UFO and all that, I think I just caught the last months of it, really.
Right.
So no, I wasn't that involved. What happened next was the next thing is experimental film and soundtracks of experimental film, and a move to Hamburg, and that's what came after having sort of that's what came next, really.
The next chapter, next decade. So how
meeting David Larcher, the magnificent Mr. Larcher, on a Hebridean island, and staggering around in the middle of winter, and I'd dropped out of art school and gone up there. Don't know what I thought I was doing, really, but and we met up, and he invited me to work on the soundtrack of his film Mare's Tale, which Clive Graham has just released on Paradigm in the last 18 months ago.
Right.
And followed by the second Larcher film, which was called Monkey's Birthday. But that jumps ahead in time about 5 or 6 years. But Clive has also released that as well. They're two great albums, and I'm very, very grateful to him, because really Mare's Tale is 1969. It's really the first moves I'm making into the sort of experimental arena, basically using multiple old tape recorders as my instruments.
Crikey, so it's quite a radical move, actually. So you find yourself in Hamburg, and then on a label as well. You sort of managed to release, was it a couple of solo albums at this point?
I met a chap called Uwe Nettelbeck, who was a brilliant film critic and a really interesting guy. And he was publishing a really good little magazine called Film Critic, actually. And because of him, because I'd been at the London Film Festival maybe already. I'm trying to think how I met. Oh yeah, I met some filmmakers. Cut a long story short, and ended up working with people like Werner Nekus and Dora O and Heinz Emmigholt, and I'm not sure about, but Klaus Viborny for sure. Anyway, and their films were all shown in sort of underground film festivals around the world, actually. The network was brilliant. It was the film co-ops of major cities from San Francisco to Berlin to, I don't know, wherever. everybody talking to each other, everybody managing to get together at some point once a year, crashing on each other's floors and so on, and showing these experimental films, which, non-narrative film without any sound whatsoever. It's the silence is overpowering in a sense. So there was a sort of filmmakers were interested in finding somehow some sort of sonic, musical, whatever accompaniment to their images, and the kind of minimalist stuff that I was interested in, and the tape work and working with tape machines. Tape being, of course, a really close medium to celluloid. I mean, you handle it in the same way. You cut it, you splice it, you overdub it, you have multiple layers of images, of sound, and you change the speed and the direction. So there's a lot of equivalence in the handling of the technology. And so I found myself, well, I had plenty of people interested in using my sound, and I was happy to oblige. And Uwe Nettelbeck was, being a film critic, was present at festivals and the showings of films which had my soundtracks. And he came to me one day and said, I think we should release albums of your soundtracks. And he got the deal with Polygram, I think it was. It was destined originally for the grandiose Deutsche Grammophon, but it's the same company. But somebody heard some of it and said, oh, the kids who's taking their drugs, they'll love this. Let's put it out on Polydor. So I ended up on Polydor, which I didn't give a shit where it came out on, really.
No.
I mean, prestigious Deutsche Grammophon, but, I can live without prestige.
Yes.
And what else? Yeah, so Uwe was managing the nascent Faust, the German band Faust. And he put them in a little schoolhouse with an 8-track studio and an engineer from, I think, Radio Bremen or something. And that's where I recorded the 3 experimental albums, Cloud Lamborum, Secrets of the Blue Bag, and Reed, Whistle and Sticks. And then they were pretty alarmed, especially as my stuff became increasingly weird. I mean, Reed, Whistle and Sticks was me literally dropping sticks on the floor for 40 minutes. And that freaked them out a bit. So Uwe said, if you want anything, if you want some kind of this to go on, maybe you would be interested in doing something a bit more listenable. and of course, I'd met Peter Blegvad very early on, because he was a pupil at the school where my parents taught by now, back in England. And I did my foundation year in St Albans, which was nearby where they were working, and I pitched up there, and met Peter, and we became extremely good friends extremely quickly. He's 1 year younger than me, I think, and we were well into the same things, and we really had a great friendship starting then in probably 1967, I think, and going on until this day. We're really soulmates. And Half Cat Music, which is the current album, and when new stuff of mine's being released, is all about Peter, really, and his drawing and his influence on my life. Anyway, so Uwe said, what about something more listenable? I said, yeah, I know this wonderful American guy. He plays great guitar. He's an amazing poet and lyricist. Let's get him over. And he came over to Hamburg, and we went in the studio and started trying to do some songs. And it was pretty clear that although Peter can belt out a song, I was sort of, I don't know what kind of noises I was making, but in the end, it became clear we ought to have somebody who could sing.
Yes.
And Dagmar pitched up, wonderful Dagmar, who was had such an incredible voice and was interested in what we were doing, and we were amazed by her. And Faust were our rhythm section. Zappy Diermeyer on drums, Jean-Hervé Perrin on bass, and a few bits and pieces by a couple of the others. And that's the beginning of Slapp Happy and the first Slapp Happy album.
It all came together. Yes, that's why you're on Polydor straight away then.
Yeah, it was a follow-on from the 3 experimental records.
And were you still in Hamburg at this point, or had you relocated?
No, I was there for about 3 years, I think.
Right, God, that's an extraordinary sort of journey. I think at this point...
A couple of years, maybe.
Had John Peel picked up on the band at this point?
I can't remember when he did pick up on us. I can't remember the year when we did the John Peel session with Robert, actually. Robert playing top kit, obviously. Yes. And I don't know if Fred Frisk did some guitar playing. There was a song called Europa. I can't remember whether it was Pierre Merlin from Gong playing vibraphones. And also Robert singing with Dagmar on Here's a Little Something for All You Lovers. Well, now that is the second album.
Right.
So we the first album sort of survived as a Polydor thing. Then Uwe got the deal with Branson at Virgin. We'd done the second album, which was called Casablanca Moon, and Virgin made us go into the studio and re-record it because it was too quirky, I suppose. And then it was re-recorded, and A Little Something was on. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was on the second album. So Peel must have been, I don't know, 73 maybe.
Yeah, I think started. I think that first session, actually, that was recorded in 1974, June 74, and then broadcast in July. So that was.
Oh, I'm a year early. Okay.
You're a little bit of a year early, but
I can't really remember anything. I mean, I'm nearly 80 years old. Don't forget.
No, but there was some sort of amazing. Just a Conversation is kind of like one of your more sort of well-known numbers, wasn't it, at that stage?
I don't think so. I don't know. I think the tango Casablanca Moon. I mean, that seemed to be the one that was picking up some sort of interest. Just a Conversation was almost an instrumental, really, and that was on Sort Of, and it was a riff, which I think I might have nicked from Kevin bass part on some Soft Machine sketch or something.
Right.
I only discovered this quite recently, and I felt I was a bit embarrassed about it, frankly. But that da 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 da, the riff of Just a Conversation, I think it's I might have nicked it, or at least hopefully I adapted it a bit. But
probably, yes.
And it was just a lot of gobbledygook. In other words, conversation in Grand Central Station, and then interspersed with the chorus, with Dagmar singing the chorus, and the verses were just, what do you call it? Just talking.
Yes.
Lots of people talking at once.
Because Slapp Happy, you were at Virgin, and did you go to Manor Studios in Oxfordshire to re-record Casablanca Moon? Was that the...
Absolutely, yeah. We were there for ages, loved it. It was very rock and roll for us.
Yes.
I enjoyed it. I mean, Peter's never really enjoyed studios, and understandably. I mean, they are kind of ridiculously... sort of sealed off places, but I have that fascination for a kind of modular combinatoric, number-driven, repetitive music and tape recorders and machines meant that I couldn't have been happier crawling around in a recording studio wearing a necklace of cables and, crawling under the desk looking for somewhere to plug them in. And so I could stay in studios without daylight for weeks.
Absolutely. And one of those bands that sort of doesn't get much recognition, but Comus. Did Roger from Comus appear on the sort of the second album as well?
I don't know. And in the moment that you mention it, I don't even know what Comus is.
Well, Comus were sort of a slightly avant-garde, I don't know, progressive folk band from the early 70s. A bit, I suppose you put them in the same category as somebody, I don't know. Incredible String Band would probably appear in someone's record collection. If you had one, you had both probably. But was he doing new arrangements of the songs? Or
Roger?
Or was
Roger
it
who?
Roger Wotton?
No, I don't think I've ever met him, actually.
No.
And I don't think he was involved. And I'm struggling to know if I had any contact with him. Although, having said that, of course, and Joe Boyd and so on, Peter and I used to in the 60s, we used to love listening to Hangman's Beautiful Daughter and Wee Tam and the Big Huge. We were quite into that. So it sounds like a likely thing that could have happened, but I have no memory whatsoever of it happening.
No. And when the album came out, what was it well received in the press? Was it endorsed?
I can't really remember. I think we always we got the equivalent of it's the kiss of death. You get good reviews and you don't sell any records, and you get shit reviews and you sell millions of records. I don't think it. I don't know if it ever even paid for itself. I really don't know. And there must have been a few reviews which Dagmar's voice was outstanding, and the songwriting is subversive. You've got these sort of innocuous music with pretty subversive lyrics set to them. And but I wonder if we picked up a bit of a reputation for being, smart asses or something. I don't know what people really thought of us, actually. And I don't know.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? What did you... And then this is like nearly the mid sort of 70s at this point. And, we'd had the sort of folk singer-songwriter from Laurel Canyon, prog rock in the UK. Yes, sort of all sorts of, the early years of, I don't know, punk, not punk rock, but, that kind of Dr. Feelgood. What was your next kind of musical sort of chapter after Slapp Happy?
I think I was back in Germany where I did a lot of film, continued with making experimental music, which got used in underground movies, and I think I was sort of quite involved. Now let me think what happened.
Did you do the collaboration with Henry Cow? Was this the next?
Oh, well, yes, of course. We've forgotten that, haven't we?
Yes.
Slapp Happy and Henry Cow merged into one sort of large family or group or whatever. And 2 albums came out of that.
Desperate Straits and Praise of Learning.
Desperate Straits, which was mostly Slapp Happy, and In Praise of Learning, which was mostly Henry Cow.
Right.
So we did spend quite a lot of time together after 7. Yeah, you're right. This is what happened then.
Yes.
I'd forgotten. So, yeah, we spent quite a lot of time together working on material, rehearsing, playing in the studio, making records, and that went on for a year or so, or a couple of years, and then me and Peter kind of peeled away from it. I think they were very excited to have Dagmar singing with them, and she was, it was a really interesting challenge for her. Peter and I perhaps were, we were and are and continue to be very good friends, but maybe musically there was something not quite so challenging for Dagmar, perhaps. I don't know. And also Peter and I didn't really work together, and he kind of, I think, got close to Faust and did some gigs with them, and I went off to Germany and did some experimental stuff. But then also I did Out, which ironically didn't come out. My 60s, the album that I would have made had I been in the position to be able to have a band and go into a recording studio in 1968 or something. I think that's pretty much what Out, the Virgin album, which they didn't release and which got released a few years ago on Drag City.
Right.
That occupied me for a spell, because I think that came out in 76.
Yes, that's
and I must
right.
have been recording. We recorded at the Manor. Kevin was playing bass on it, Ayers, and Andy Summers was playing slide guitar before the Police thing took off or happened. Barry D'Souza on drums. That was a real pleasure. Who I'd sort of listened to on Transformer, on Lou Reed's Transformer.
Right.
It was a great band, and we made Out, and there's some pretty songs on it.
Yes. And was this produced by Pete Jenner as well?
Yes, it is produced by Pete Jenner from Black Hill Enterprises. Took over my publishing and management in 72 when we came over and signed with Virgin as Slapp Happy. I think it was 72, 73. And so me, Andrew King and Pete Jenner were kind of looking after my nonsense. And they were very good. They were good mates. And Peter did produce that record with Phil McDonald, Rolling Stones engineer, up at the Manor again.
Right.
And yeah, I was really pretty taken aback when Virgin decided, to drop me off the label and not release the record, especially as they'd spent. That record was ready to go. Yes. It was mixed, mastered, everything. The only thing that even the cover, Hypnosis cover, was done. And the only thing that hadn't happened was any sort of vinyl pressings. So they sent the cover with the cassette to Japan for overseas international licensing. And amazingly, somebody who was working at Sony or wherever it went to in Tokyo, saw the project was going to fall to pieces because Virgin had dropped me and not going to release the record, and saved the cover.
Ooh,
and 45 years later, nearly half a century later, I met the guy who inherited the record collection and artifacts of music from this guy who'd rescued it from the office. And he said, I've got the cover. And we were able to send it to Chicago for Drag City to sort of renovate it, and did a perfect job of bringing the cover back to life. And after nearly 50 years, the empty sleeve finally received what it was designed for. A record went into it. Isn't that a lovely story?
That is amazing. I can't. Yes, 2020, Drag City brings it out.
Yeah.
But you
Then the next thing I did in the UK was Flying Doesn't Help on Quango, which was with the wonderful assistance of the provocative Glenn Coulson. who helped a lot in making things come to fruition, and formed this absolutely absurd, fictitious record company called Quango, and we pressed up, I think, maybe 25,000 copies of that and sold them all through Rough Trade, and
Fantastic.
that had a few songs on it that people seem to enjoy a lot, like Judy and Caught Being in Love. And I still do some of those songs, actually, totally rearranged for improvised double bass and trombone. But yeah, that was a big thing. And Manfred working in the Workhouse studio with Laurie Latham, who he had worked with Manfred, and he knew the studio had a lovely desk. And he and I just locked ourselves in there and on dead time and did the whole album together. And then, of course, he went on to work with, Echo and the Bunnymen and the Stranglers and all sorts of interesting things.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah.
Who was that? Who was? Oh, so I was going to say, who was that again? I missed that.
Laurie Latham, wonderful friend and producer.
Yes, God, Laurie Lane. Then you did Flying Doesn't Help World Service on Do It Records.
Well, so then we leave the 70s and arrive in the early 80s and Do It, Ian the Tregonning brothers, and we have a crack at doing something with a record called World Service, which went through a few changes. It was recorded in bits in Zurich, with friends in the Friends studio in Berlin, and at the Workhouse.
Right. God, that was.
And it went on. Oh yeah, no, that was Do It. Yeah, right.
Do It. But then you got signed to Parlophone to do The Only Choice.
Oh yes, my 80s.
Your 80s. I mean, the 80s. And how did you feel sort of as you straddled the 60s and 70s and then that 80s with, a lot more technology and a different sort of sound started to appear with people like that Trevor Horn production? And
you're right. Yeah.
It became quite different, didn't it? Did you manage to sort of deal with that moment? Okay.
I think that yeah, no, I mean, I'm always into a bit of technology and stuff, and working with with sequencers and with the MC4 with Matt Irving, who played with Paul Young on No Parley, which was of course a song I'd written earlier and which Paul covered and nobody ever listened to, which is not surprising because the lyrics, I wrote the lyrics and the music, and the lyrics are really quite vicious. If you actually listen to what is being said, it's...
Oh, I'll have to go back to the Paul Young period.
Hey, people, you hate your children, basically, and you don't talk to each other, and you're fucking the world up, and you're a bunch of cunts.
Right.
That's what that song says. And everybody thinks Wherever I Lay My Hat. But yeah. Paul, God bless him, picked it up and did it. And that actually got us, I got made a bit of money from that.
Well, I would imagine.
It wasn't a fortune. It was just one song, publishing with one song on. But the album was quite successful. And
it was one of the kind of, from that year and for quite a few years, everybody of that album was everywhere, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, there's big jokes about it in secondhand record shops, apparently.
Oh,
anyway,
you're right. Yeah. That is true, actually.
And there's a wonderful guy up in oh gosh, where is he? Leeds. Liverpool. Oh, flipping heck. I've forgotten. He'll kill me if he hears this.
I know, he will say.
He's done an amazing zine on No Parley called Zero Plan, which is in fact an anagram, a brilliant anagram of No Parley. And I ought to get his name. Oh, God.
Was it Alan Dunn?
Yes, exactly. The wonderful Alan. Thank you.
God, thank God for that. We got there in the end. But yeah, so what sort of state of mind were you in when I was just reading these lyrics. So what was the general gist of it, actually?
I've always been, I've been, up to my neck in machines and ideas of combinations and tape and stuff on one side, and on the other side I've always been quite a sort of angry young man, and not such a young man now, but still really angry. I get quite upset and ridiculous about because I suppose I ought to actually act more and stop just ranting. But the state of things is something that Germany, Dagmar, Henry Cow, of course, probably maybe that's where they were. They were sort of somewhat left of the Communist Party, basically, and we had lots of discussions about political interactions. Art is not a mirror, it's a hammer. And so, and Brecht, I always was interested somehow, even as a school kid, in Brecht and Eisler, and Dagmar, and working in Germany. So, and Dagmar's profound interest in songs from Brecht and Eisler and her brilliant interpretations of them. So yeah, no, I've always been, in most of the songs. There are a lot of soppy lines, I suppose, and it's a bit inconsistent, but in many of them you will uncover traces of angriness about how...
Yes. But then during that period, sort of from the late 80s, we're the Thatcher years of the sort of Falkland War and the miners' strike and Greenham Common, you sort of then sort of slip into sort of meeting or working with sort of Pink Floyd. Does that sort of follow on a little bit after the...
No. If you listen, again, it's what happened. David Gilmour, I think it was Glenn Coulson probably. There was a connection between Glenn and Steve O'Rourke, who was the Pink Floyd management, and Roger and David had parted ways fairly acrimoniously. And so David was kind of looking around perhaps for, interesting sort of left field people to work with or something. And and why, I couldn't see any reason not to work with him, actually. He was very kind and open, and we had good discussions, and he was at the time of Momentary Lapse of Reason interested then in songs with, to some extent, messages, if you like. And On the Turning Away is, again, my lyrics, and it says what it says, people, you hate your children. And it says pretty much the same thing. And learning to fly is a bit more probably to do with kind of, sort of existential angst of the individual rather than a political thing. And the Dogs of War. Dogs of War is the other one. By then I'd written Industrial Drums. I was writing about, the extraordinary justification for keeping people in, for the arms industry being a way of keeping people in work.
Yes.
Fucking stupid idea that is.
Well, yes.
Anyway,
It's
so that's in. Keep the people. You've got in the bed of iron. They cast the final weapon just to keep the people working. You've got to keep the people working. That's around about the same time, mid-80s or something. And Dogs of War is also about mercenaries and arms dealing and on the turning away. So no, it's. I don't see it as anything other than part of what I was doing already, and the fact that it happened to be Pink Floyd, and obviously, but I was invited. I mean, wasn't that I was chasing after it or anything.
Well, no, I would imagine that wouldn't be an entry point. We're trying to chase somebody, really. It doesn't normally work, does it? You have to get invited.
I've never tried.
No, and it's how does it work? Who knows? Then, sort of with that, were you doing other projects as well during that sort of late 80s?
Yeah, I kept flipping back and forwards to Germany and to experimental film and to experimental music. So I had a fairly bizarre sort of schizophrenic existence, really, between working in song and the song form and working on the more experimental stuff. But very interestingly enough, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I've recently been having discussions about the similarities of what I, for a while through the 80s and 90s, imagined were two separate worlds, and of course, or even earlier, actually, that kind of schizophrenic split, probably even in Slapp Happy. I remember Peter saying, "Why don't we do some more experimental stuff? Why are we?" And I said, I like these songs. I like this. I like the song form, and I think the lyrics are the tension between the lyrics and the song form and Daggy's voice, and so I kept the world separate, and it was perhaps stupid of me, and I could have tried to understand. It's still not automatically easy for me to bring the worlds together, but somebody on John Dale in Australia, who writes for Uncut and so on.
Oh yes,
and a couple of other people have spoken to me about the evident similarity between the kind of module forms of songs and repetitions of sections of song and so on, and minimalist composition. In some sense, they aren't worlds apart. Anyway, yeah. So rushing through the 80s, and then what happens? Savard, the last Slapp Happy album, beautiful, beautiful album. Nobody picks it up really. It's on V2. I don't know what happened. It just came out and vanished. A lot of my stuff does that. And then opera. We wrote an opera. Slapp Happy wrote the opera Camera for Channel 4.
Right.
And then I was offered a professorship in Cologne.
Right.
Back in Germany again.
Was that quite a surprise?
Yeah, it was, insofar as I was an art school dropout with no academic qualifications. It was a hell of a surprise because it was a top prof job, pretty well paid, and against some stiff competition from some really good people. I mean, probably people who have been, well, who knows? I think I did a good job of it. I did it for 20 years, and so I think I certainly learned a hell of a lot. And I think probably the best way to teach is to learn with your students rather than to preach at them.
Yes, well, absolutely.
Yeah, so I did that, and I opened up amazing worlds for me in terms of the history of sound and the history of recording and the theories of tuning, and all the way from the sort of bronze casting ancient bells of China to the Pythagoreans to, you know, Athanasius Kircher to Edison to the sort of, you know, history of science, and all connecting always to sound. And that was a really brilliant patch. But I didn't produce any music. I stopped completely. I just went. I went. It's completely sort of into research and so on. And I didn't miss it, actually. I think by 94, 95, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do musically.
Yes.
So I was quite happy not to do anything until about 2015, and then basically I got to 65, or how old was I? I don't know, 66 or something, whatever it was.
Yes.
And in Germany, unlike in the States and other places, when professors reach a certain age, they get shoved aside, quite rightly too, for the young people to come through. And at that point, I immediately started making music again.
Nice.
And I realized that there were things that I'd never done, which were really would be challenging in my later years and really worth doing, and might also even be, you know, quite good for me mentally and physically, which was to open up to performance, to performing. In other words, to do something that scared the shit out of me on purpose, you know, to actually sort of prod me with a cattle prod into not just sort of becoming senile and meaningless. And so I and also I had some really good friends in Cologne. There's a group there called the Therapeutische Hörgruppe Cologne, which consists of 3, 4, 5 really brilliant electronic musicians, and I was very, very lucky that they kind of took me in and showed me how one could sort of make performances and produce sounds and results that you haven't actually no idea what's going to come next. I mean, it's not just performing, which is scary, but then you also decide to perform without knowing what it is you're going to actually be producing on stage. And that's about as intense as it gets, really. And I fling myself into that as often as I can and continue to do so down here in St. Leonard's.
Yes. And then with that, you did an album with them called All Talks, and then you followed up with Arithmetic in the Dark on Touch Records.
Yeah, I think the present is missing. Possibly comes on Our Music, you know, that amazing record store and label in Cologne.
Yes,
and with the Missing Present band, and it's a live album from the Stadtgarten in Cologne of a performance where and it's got 4 pieces on it, and that was called The Present is Missing. And that was already my kind of speculations about, you know, the ungraspable now of spontaneous what's it called? Spontaneous composition? What do the improvisers call it to distinguish it from improvised composition or spontaneous? I can't remember. But yeah, so that was that. And All Talks was an extraordinary experiment in passing that sound through all sorts of strange media, minerals, and very much inspired by the seminars that I've been teaching and by the students in Cologne, and also appearing on the Her Grouper again.
Oh, yes.
And so then Missing Present, then Arithmetic in the Dark with Mike and John Wozencroft at Touch, and which was a kind of reworking. Oh, there's another album we've forgotten about. It's Arp and Anthony Moore, recorded in New York in 2010.
Right, I've got it. Arp, yes.
Yeah, and that was an inspired idea by RVNG. I've forgotten his name. He's such a great guy, the guy who runs that record company. Oh, fuck's sake. Honestly, getting old ain't for sissies. But anyway, he had this brilliant idea based on the folkways, rescuing disappearing music.
Right.
But in his case, it was also featuring music of American composers who had not been recognized, and teaming them up with their sort of with their older Arp was making music. He was very well informed, and he was, to some extent at that time anyway, 2010, exploring kind of minimal music.
Yeah.
And I at that point, being sort of however old I was, 60 plus or something. No. Yes, possibly. Yeah. 50, 60. Oh, yeah, 62. Anyway, had dabbled in this stuff in the late 60s. So, who runs RVN?
Oh, was that Matt?
Yes, Matt.
Reith.
Is it? Yeah.
Ruth.
Anyway, he put us together for that record, and I went to New York and recorded with that. That was exciting. And Arithmetic in the Dark has some similarities in the sense that it's kind of revisiting and reworking early tape works on magnetic tape, and also exploring that from the teaching. It's a couple of decades of teaching, the idea of a pre-literate society that would communicate with sound rather than with language, and that I called it's arithmetic without signs. Hence,
Right.
In the Dark, it's saying that, if a child and an adult sing together, they're an octave apart. They're doing multiplication by 2. In an arithmetic without signs, because the octaves are perfectly doubled. Anyway, but it also was a kind of pointing towards the early tape works as well, Arithmetic in the Dark.
Yes.
And then Human Geography, the most gorgeous record with Peter Blegvad. That's a real treasure, that album. Have you come across it?
No. This is on Half Cat Records, isn't it?
That's my little label, yeah. That is a really special record of Peter reading America, sort of early mid-20th century American sort of texts about rootlessness and drinking, and because of course Peter and I have both been fairly consistent imbibers of the heavenly nectar. So it's a wonderful record. And then I had a trio down here called AKA, which is a nifty name, really, otherwise known as, but also Amanda, Keith, and Anthony. And we did Electromics on Half Cat. Then I formed a trio with Ollie Bryce on double bass and Tullis Rennie on trombone and electronics, and we're called Ob Tram 3, and we're playing on Saturday right after a gig on this coming Friday with Ed Baxter of London Musicians Collective and, of course, Resonance FM fame, put together this big band down here, and I'm on duty in that as a noise maker to introduce a sound to a big band that not many big bands feature, which is electronic chaos, basically. So why did I say that? Oh, Optram 3, yeah. And then I did a lovely album, half recorded at Cafe Oto and the other half down here, called Hastings London. And that features John Butcher on saxophone and Matthias Mucher, another of my Cologne contacts who is an amazing trombone player, and he has a band called Bone Crusher. And he's a brilliant trombonist. So, yeah, on I go, and it's increasingly exhausting. But I get very nervous when I'm doing absolutely nothing. I start grinding my teeth if nothing's happening.
Right. Well, yes, absolutely. It's never good. Where's the best place to access your kind of catalogue and sort of musical
www.halfcatmusic.com.
Right, that's the go-to
there you will
place.
Get all the information. There's a Bandcamp site which I can't seem to make visible as much as I try, but I think it's Anthony-Halfcat.
Right.
And on there are digital files available for the 4 albums, or what is it? Electronic Hastings. I don't think Human Geography is on there, but I can't remember. But basically, Half Cat Music has a website which sometimes opens and sometimes doesn't. And when it does open, on the top left-hand corner, you will see the scratch marks of a half cat being clawing at the top left-hand side of your screen.
Yes.
And if you click on that, it's a link. And inside that, you have some categories like recordings. That's probably the most interesting one. And if you click on recordings, you see every record I've made since 1968.
Fantastic. I have got it here, actually, yes. And that's...
Are you in recordings?
I am in recordings, and I am looking at this.
And the top is an index. It's an active index. If you click on there, it takes you straight to the record, or you can just scroll down and down and down and down.
Yes, it has it all here. Oh, that's really, yes, because cataloguing and archiving is terribly important in life.
Oh, that's such a bore, though.
It is a tedious thing. Some people are good, some people aren't, some people lose interest.
I get tangled up. I mean, I despair of Bandcamp. I tried to join a new sort of one called Subvert, which is a kind of in a good sense, sort of, what should I say, alternative to Bandcamp.
Yeah.
But I can't even upload any tracks to it because they want, I think the one downside is that they want you to set up a PayPal or some kind of money account. And I just don't know how to do it. And also they're in America, and I'm so utterly pissed off with how expensive it is to move things in and out of this country, like records and stuff. It's just pathetic.
Yes.
It's this post-Brexit shit heap that we live on is just unbelievable. Fucking believable. You actually have the feeling now that you're being discouraged from traveling and or communicating or sending things anywhere off the island. It's really horrible. I think I might piss off soon, actually. I don't know why I came back.
Oh, but where? It's so tricky. Yeah, well, that's so going forward, and Jesus, that's an amazing past. But what? So you've got some live dates, and do you have any other albums that you're looking to be releasing soon, or any other
Yeah,
projects?
there's a 5 CD box set of a 5 day long session that took place in Cologne a couple of summers ago, and I really want to I've mixed it, and each day is a new piece, completely newly recorded and obviously newly mixed. And it's 5 or 6 of us playing together, and I love it, and it brings me all the way back to Contact. I mean, it's not nostalgic in that sense, but it does remind me of the electronic music studios in Cologne in the early 50s, when Stockhausen was doing the most radical sort of electronic stuff, and then you've got in Paris. Anyway, yeah, it's that I definitely want to see coming out, and I won't do it on vinyl. It's too expensive. It's too heavy. You can't ship it. I'm joining the race back to CDs.
Right.
And
Yes.
if not cassettes. And then also vinyl's a bit oily, you know. But anyway, and then yes, more AKA output. We're working on some really lovely pieces with the AKA trio: Amanda, Keith Anthony, Amanda Thompson, Keith Rodway, and myself. So that's going to be stuff coming out on Bandcamp, CD, digital, whatever.
Yes.
I don't know what else really. It might all grind to a halt soon. I'm feeling like I'm running a bit low on fuel somehow. So I don't know. I might end up just reading books.
Well, to yourself.
To myself, of course, silently, yes.
Silently there. Oh, wow. Well, just watch this space. Because I think was the last thing on Bandcamp was on Beacon Hill, wasn't it?
Oh, that's another record. I forgot that one. That's part of the Drag City quartet of records. It goes out, Flying Doesn't Help, then the very quirky one called Home of the Demo, which is a kind of, I know it's not a homage, but it's a look at the big seismic shift of analog to digital that takes place, and the cheap Japanese flooding the market with sort of early cheap Japanese equipment, and the sort of very beginnings of sort of MIDI sequencing and sampling that sort of starts in the late 70s. And I think that analog to digital shift in music that probably, I'm not completely sure on timing, but it seems to take place in the last 2 years of the 70s somehow.
Yes.
I mean, obviously there are no such things as beginnings and endings. I mean, you'll find traces going back much before, and media archaeology is something that I was taught by the magnificent Siegfried Zielinski, who's doing a lot of work with FM Einheit at the moment. But
Right.
But yeah, so Home of the Demo. There's one track on there which is I won't talk about that one. And then yes, on Beacon Hill, which is a rather special kind of pretty much live in a way, although it's not marketed as a live record. I mean, there are some overdubs and some post-production, but on the other hand, a lot of it is quite live, and it's based on the idea that if you write songs which have only got sort of 3 chords in them, you don't need to rehearse. you can just get up and do it. And so there's a lot of spontaneity in it, in on that record. But the songs are there, so it's a kind of combination of improvisation, spontaneity, and composition.
Yes, God, that's interesting.
But in song form, very much as a collection of quite gloomy, sort of, and somewhat romantic songs.
Nice, crikey. Well, look, Anthony, thank you ever so much.
We've probably done more than 40 minutes now, haven't
well,
we?
yes, we'd only got up to the 90s at that stage, actually.
I've got to get back to work. I've got for these 2 gigs on Friday and Saturday.
Oh yes, of course. Look, thank you ever so much. We've mastered the things that we never even thought possible. Okay. Zoom and I mean, that was incredible actually to have gone through that process. I feel like we went on a journey somehow, but yeah. I hope that wasn't too painful. But look, I'll let you get back to work because obviously. Okay. Thank you, Anthony. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that was me in conversation with Anthony Moore talking about his life in music. This has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh. Have a great week. Stay safe.